They thought a simple fence could strip a man of his freedom. In a quiet rural town, an elderly black rancher woke up one morning to find his land boxed in, trapped by walls he never asked for, walls that told him he didn't belong. But what the HOA didn't know was that this man carried more than pride. He carried a plan that would turn humiliation into power. The question is, how do you fight back when the world tries to lock you out of your own home?
Before the fence, life on the ranch was simple and honest. For decades, Mr. Harris, an elderly black rancher with weathered hands and a quiet dignity, had cared for his land as if it were family. Each morning he'd rise before the sun, tip his hat, and walk the fields, checking on his cattle as they grazed freely under the wide blue sky. His neighbors often saw him riding slowly along the dirt paths, humming old country songs, never bothering anyone, always carrying himself with quiet pride. To him, the ranch was more than property. It was heritage. It was the fruit of years of sacrifice, sweat, and unshakable resilience. Every fence post he hammered, every calf he raised, it all told the story of survival in a world that had often tried to deny him a place. But in recent years, whispers began to grow louder. The HOA, dominated by people who had never set foot in a field, saw his land not as a legacy, but as a problem. Some claimed his ranch didn't fit the look of the community. Others whispered that a black man owning so much land made them uncomfortable. Still, Mr. Harris ignored the stares and the murmurs, until one morning when the quiet hum of his routine was replaced by the jarring clank of construction. Workers drove posts into the ground, not for him, but against him. The peace he had built for decades was about to be walled in. At first, Mr. Harris thought the fence was just a mistake. Maybe the construction crew had gotten the property lines wrong. But as he approached the workers, clipboard papers flashed in his face, documents signed by the HOA claiming community improvements. The words stung, not because they meant anything real, but because they carried a clear message. He was not wanted here. Day by day, the fence crept higher, boxing in the land he had built his life around. The cattle grew restless, penned into tighter corners. Neighbors who once waved from the road now avoided his eyes. And when Mr. Harris tried to confront the HOA president, a sharp-faced woman with polished heels, she dismissed him coldly, saying, "Rules are rules. If you don't like it, you can always sell." But selling was never an option. This ranch was his father's and his father's before that. It was one of the few legacies left untouched by the generations of systemic theft and displacement faced by families like his. Walking away would mean surrendering everything. The discrimination became more blatant as weeks passed. The HOA began sending letters claiming his ranch was an eyesore to the modern community. They issued fines for imagined violations: grass too long, cattle too close to the fence, barn paint faded. Each envelope was another weapon, another reminder that the fight wasn't just about land, it was about dignity. Mr. Harris tried reaching out for help, but doors closed quickly. Local officials dismissed his claims, brushing them off as a private matter. Even the police who came by seemed more interested in backing the HOA than hearing his side. One officer told him flatly, "Sir, you'll have to take it up in court. Until then, stay behind the fence." The walls were closing in, literally and figuratively. Nights became sleepless. He would sit on his porch, hat in his lap, staring at the fence posts that now sliced through his view of the horizon. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was a prison, built in plain sight, sanctioned by a community that pretended it was all just policy. But behind his tired eyes, a spark remained. He began collecting every letter, every notice, every scrap of paper. He took pictures of the fence line, the construction dates, the signatures. Quietly, patiently, he was building a case one they wouldn't see coming. Because Mr. Harris knew something the HOA didn't. Sometimes the fight isn't won by brute force, but by holding the one key they never expected you to have.
The breaking point came one blazing afternoon. Mr. Harris returned from town only to find the final section of fence sealed shut with a heavy lock. His land, his heritage, was no longer accessible to him. The gate swung closed with a metallic clang, the sound echoing like a verdict. Standing before it, sweat rolling down his weathered face, he realized the HOA had taken the last step. They hadn't just boxed him in, they had stolen his freedom to even enter. As he rattled the gate, neighbors stood at a distance, whispering, some shaking their heads. The HOA president arrived, clipboard in hand, flanked by officers who leaned against their car with folded arms. With a smirk, she said, "This is for the good of the community. Maybe it's time you let this place go." It was humiliation sharpened into cruelty, delivered in broad daylight. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Mr. Harris could feel his chest tighten, his blood boil. But behind the anger came something stronger, resolve. Slowly, he straightened, placed his cowboy hat firmly back on his head, and met her gaze without flinching. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. Instead, he pulled a small envelope from his coat pocket, the papers he had spent weeks gathering, waiting for this very moment. Inside was proof that would change everything. The HOA thought they had locked him out forever, but they had overlooked one fact. The man they tried to erase had just bought the land beneath their fence, the ground under their feet, and the only key that mattered now belonged to him. And with that revelation, the balance of power shifted.
When the envelope was opened, silence fell over the crowd. Inside were the official documents proving Mr. Harris had bought the disputed property, the very strip of land the HOA used to fence him in. Every signature, every stamp was there in black and white. The ground beneath the fence no longer belonged to the association. It belonged to him. The smug expression on the HOA president's face vanished. The police officers, once so quick to back her, now shifted uncomfortably, realizing they had no authority to intervene. Neighbors who had stayed silent now looked on in stunned disbelief as the man they thought they could erase stood taller than ever before. For Mr. Harris, it wasn't just a legal victory, it was a spiritual one. The fence that was meant to box him in had become a symbol of resilience. His quiet defiance proved that even in the face of systemic racism, dignity and persistence could turn injustice into justice. Yet the scars remained, the sleepless nights, the humiliation, the painful reminder that prejudice still walks freely in communities across America. This story is not just about one rancher. It is about every person who has been told they don't belong. It is about the countless battles fought behind closed doors, in courtrooms, and in neighborhoods where power hides behind rules and paperwork. The fence may be gone now, but the question lingers. How many others are still trapped behind invisible walls, denied their rightful place simply because of the color of their skin? And so the takeaway is clear. Silence protects the oppressor, but resilience exposes the truth. Would you have stood with Mr. Harris or stayed silent on the other side of the fence?